This is a 26,000 milliamp hour power bank, and this is the iPhone 17 Pro Max at just under 5,000. On paper you'd expect a little over 5 full charges, but in reality you only get around 3.5. Now I'm sure that we've all been there wondering what is going on. If you've ever done the maths yourself and felt confused, you are definitely not alone. You've probably heard terms like watt hours and efficiency thrown around, but they're rarely explained properly. So in this video, I want to break it all down and show you exactly where that missing energy actually goes. We are going to have to do some maths, but I promise you it's simple, and by the end of this video you'll know exactly what to look for when you're buying a new power bank. Welcome back to the channel, my name is Jackington, you can find me on all of these socials. So just for some more context, this is the Anker Prime 26K. I recently reviewed it, it's an amazing power bank, I will link to my video on it below, but just like all power banks, it can be kind of confusing trying to work out how much power or energy you'll get from it into your devices. When I did a charge test with my 17 Pro Max to 100%, the Prime still had 73% remaining, as you can check on its handy display or in the companion app. So it used about 27% of its capacity for a full charge, which works out to roughly 3.7 charges for the iPhone in total. Now, just to add, the iPhone 17 in the UK still has the physical SIM slot, so it does have a slightly smaller capacity than the eSIM only versions in other parts of the world. So let's start with milliamp hours, or mAh, because this is where most of the confusion tends to come from. mAh sounds like it's telling you how powerful a battery is or how much energy it has, but that's not really what it measures. All milliamp hours actually tells you is how much electrical charge a battery can hold at a specific voltage. That's it. Nothing about power, nothing about energy on its own. And that voltage part is really important. The Anker Prime cells sit at 3.7 volts each, while the iPhone battery is closer to 3.887. Now, when you charge the phone, the power bank isn't just passing the volts along, it boosts the energy to high voltages for fast charging, and then the phone steps it back down to fill the battery. That means that energy is being converted multiple times, and some is always lost as heat. So the voltage is constantly changing throughout the charge cycle. And this is where milliamp hours just completely falls apart. You're not moving milliamp hours from the power bank into the phone like pouring water from one container into another. So when you compare a 26,250 milliamp hour power bank to a 4,823 hour phone battery, you're comparing two numbers that exist at completely different points in the process. Once voltage starts changing like this, milliamp hours just stops being a useful way to compare anything. So dividing the mAh on a power bank by the mAh on your phone almost never matches reality. At best it gives you a rough guess, and at worst it is just completely misleading. That's why mAh comparisons between power banks and phones just don't work. So what should we be using instead? Well, this is where watt hours come in. Watt hours measure total energy stored. They already take voltage into account, which is the big thing that mAh completely ignores. That's why airlines care about watt hours. It's why laptops, power tools, and a lot bigger batteries are often rated in watt hours. It's the most honest way of saying how much energy is actually inside a battery. So let's do a proper comparison using watt hours. The Anker Prime has a capacity of 99.75, whereas the iPhone 17 Pro Max is about 19. If you divide one by the other, you get roughly 5.3 full charges. But wait, that estimate is not that much better than comparing milliamp hours, and it's still way off the 3.7 figure I was actually getting. Now, while we are talking about actual energy, not just electrical charge, that result still has a massive assumption baked in. That 5.3 figure assumes perfect efficiency, no heat, no conversion losses, which obviously never happens. In the real world, energy doesn't just move from one battery to another untouched. Some of it is always lost along the way. So watt hours tells you how much energy exists inside a battery, but it doesn't tell you how much of that energy actually survives the journey into your phone. And that difference is where the missing charges live. So now we get to the important part. If watt hours says there's enough energy here for 5.3 charges, but you only see around 3.7 in reality, then where is the rest going? Well, this isn't unique to this power bank, but Anker estimates around a 30 to 45% energy loss during conversion. In their words, a fully charged 26K power bank delivers roughly 15K into your devices. That loss happens before your phone even comes into play. It's the cost of taking energy out of a battery, regulating it, and making it usable at the other end. As I said before, most of the missing energy comes from how it's converted. Energy starts at 3.7 volts, gets boosted to the higher voltage for fast charging, and then steps back down again inside the phone. Each step generates heat, which is energy that never reaches your phone's battery. And fast charging prioritizes speed over efficiency. Early in the cycle, the phone draws a lot of power, creating heat. And as it nears 100%, it slows down to protect the health of the battery. So let's pull all of this together. On paper, the theoretical maximum is about 5.3 full charges, but real-world efficiency is closer to 65 to 75% because of voltage conversion, heat, and the phone protecting its battery. So let's keep the math simple. Multiply 5.3 by 0.7, and you get roughly 3.7 charges, exactly what I saw in my testing. So the important takeaway here is this: the power bank isn't underperforming, nothing is broken, the maths just didn't factor in efficiency. The missing energy just goes into voltage conversion, heat, and the phone's protective charging behaviour. If you've ever returned a power bank because you thought it was faulty because of this, then I'm sure you're not the only one. But the mistake isn't the product, it's the assumption that all of the energy makes it from one battery to the other untouched. Once you account for losses, the numbers line up perfectly. Now let's put all of this into perspective. Let's look at a bigger device. This is my 13-inch M4 iPad Pro. It has a battery capacity of around 10k milliamp hours, which works out at around 39 watt hours. When you charge something like an iPad from a power bank, the numbers tend to make a lot more sense, and it's not just your imagination. In my own testing, after one full charge, the Anker Prime still had about 41% capacity left. So it used roughly 59% of the power bank for a full charge, which works out to roughly 1.7 charges in total. If we do the same watt-hour maths as before, you get a theoretical maximum of about 2.6 charges. Then you factor in the real-world efficiency, let's say around 70%, and you end up with around 1.8 charges. And that lines up almost perfectly with what I actually saw. My iPad battery health isn't at 100% anymore, which likely explains that small gap between the maths and reality. The reason that tablets behave better here is simple. Bigger batteries spread the cost of charging over more stored energy. Less time is spent topping up at the inefficient end of the charge curve, and more of the charge happens in the efficient middle. Phones, by contrast, spend a lot more time slowing down and protecting the battery near the top, which means a higher proportion of energy is lost as heat. On top of that, tablets tend to line up better with USB-C power delivery profiles. They sit at higher, steadier power levels for longer, with fewer voltage swings, and just slightly better efficiency overall. So while no power bank is perfectly efficient, bigger devices like tablets tend to make the maths look a lot more honest in real-world use. Now let's talk about wireless charging, because this is where expectations tend to drift the furthest from reality. At a basic level, wireless charging is just always going to be less efficient than wired. Instead of pushing electricity directly through a cable, energy has to jump across a small air gap using electromagnetic fields. That process, inductive transfer, is inherently messy, and some energy is always lost as heat. Apple's MagSafe system does improve things. The magnets help line up the coils inside the phone and the charger far more accurately than a standard Qi pad, which reduces losses and makes power delivery more consistent. But MagSafe isn't magic. It doesn't fix the fundamental inefficiency of wireless charging. It just removes some of the avoidable losses caused by poor alignment. Compared to a regular Qi pad, it is better. Compared to a cable, it is still worse. To see how things play out in practice, I tested the new Charge IceMag 3. It is a 10,000 mAh power bank, which works out around 39.1 watt hours. It supports Qi to 25 watt MagSafe charging, and importantly, it also has a small fan built in. If we do the watt hour maths, the theoretical maximum is about 2.1 charges. Then you factor in real world wireless efficiency, around 58%, and you land at roughly 1.2 actual charges. And that lines up pretty much perfectly with what I saw. A full wireless charge of the 17 Pro Max used roughly 75% of the IceMag's capacity, leaving around 25% remaining. It's hard to be exact though, as it only uses 4 LED lights, but it works out at around 1.3 full charges. Now the big factor here is heat. Wireless charging generates heat both in the charger and in the phone, and once temperatures rise, the phone will start to slow charging down to protect the battery. Now the IceMag 3 has a small fan which helps keep temperatures lower. It reduces thermal throttling and lets the phone stay at higher power levels for longer. I also tested another 10K MagSafe power bank with no active cooling, same phone, same idea, just no fan, and this one took noticeably longer to reach 100%. And that extra time matters. The longer that a phone spends charging, the more energy gets lost as heat. So while wireless charging is always less efficient than wired, good alignment and active cooling can make a real measurable difference in how much energy actually makes it into your phone's battery. So after all that, here's the real lesson. Watt hours are still the right unit to use, they're just often misunderstood. Watt hours are for comparing power banks to other power banks. They tell you which ones store more energy and whether a power bank is capable of charging bigger devices like tablets and laptops. That's why airlines care about them and why they're used on pretty much every serious battery-powered device. What watt hours don't do is guarantee how many times your phone will charge. They tell you how much energy exists inside a battery, but they don't tell you how much of that energy survives the trip into your device. That part depends on efficiency. So here's a few practical rules that you can actually use. Ignore milliamp hours when you're comparing a power bank to a phone because they're just useless. They only really work when everything is at the same voltage. Always check the watt hours, that's your starting point, and then adjust your expectations. I've simplified the equation if you want to screenshot it. Take the power bank capacity, multiply it by its efficiency, and then divide the result by your device capacity for the most accurate way to estimate charges. For wired charging, expect roughly 70% efficiency, so multiply by 0.7. Then for wireless with MagSafe, it's usually closer to around 58%, so multiply by 0.58. Slower charging is usually more efficient, and heat is the biggest enemy of usable capacity. If something is getting warm, that means that energy is being wasted. So the takeaway here isn't that your power banks are lying to you, and it's not that your phone is bad or inefficient, it's that the numbers on the box just don't come with enough context. And I do get the impression that milliamp hours stick around partly because they just look good in the marketing. They're big numbers, usually in the tens of thousands, and big numbers just feel more impressive. It's a bit like megapixels on cameras. On their own, they sound meaningful, but they don't really tell you how something's going to perform in real use. If you've ever felt shortchanged by a power bank, hopefully this video has explained why it's not actually lying to you. Leave a like if it did help you out, and hopefully this is useful knowledge that you can use next time you are buying a power bank. Check out my videos on the Prime and the IceMag 3 if you want to see more on those, and I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.